in the 1860s, 1850s. You can do your research. When did they change the Marine Corps emblem from being, I think it was a bugle, to having an eagle on top of the world? And who was the commandant when that happened? Ask that question and find out the answer. And then wonder, like I do. And George told me, he said, you know, we've always been the murderers. He said, you know, why do you think we have the red line down our pants? And he said, now because he was trying to interpret for me. We have this X on top of our hat or something. You know, it had something to do with target practice. I spoke to his uncle Dick Griggs, who also works for the mob, the intelligence community. It has something to do with the schools. They have money, limitless money. I believe it's mob money for poor boys to go to these fancy schools. Uncle Dick has a little computer like Roger Oberndorf does.
Uncle Dick.
George's uncle, Richard Griggs, who became his father because they were trying to get him away from his father. He was away from his parents for 8 years. His uncle handled him. His uncle is getting money from this group. He used to be just a school teacher in Princeton. But he has two sons, Bob and Jeff, who are like my husband's brothers. Now, what does Bob do? That's the question of the century. What does Bob do? Bob handles an account for my husband. And I started asking questions about, well, where is this? Bob moved from Princeton, then he moved down to Oklahoma City. He was near that Augusta Golf Club, and, you know, now he's in Colorado, and he's handling this account that George has money in. And I see papers of my husband's after Beirut. In other words, he'd done a job. And it was a civilian job. Now, here's a colonel in the Marine Corps doing a civilian job. TAD.
TAD.
It's where they go off and do a job sort of undercover. They get a new... George says he's had so many different passports with different names. I'm getting mail from an Engelhard. He's got accounts now for an Engelhard. I get mail from Princeton private account. From Merrill Lynch is involved with the mob. They have rogues in there who launder cash money. They have people who launder cash money in Norfolk. I know some of the people who handle the cash. No. He's a German. He's the son of a German family. But his father was in Atlantic City doing very shaky things. In fact, his father's father, not his father, take that back. His father, Ray, was a weak, precious little man, and I liked him. Nobody listened to Ray. You know, the mother ran everything. The mother was strong, domineering, bossy, and I must say she was not attractive, but Ray was handsome. They married. They had 3 boys. I know she had to get married, the older brother, but in those days it was very embarrassing, you know. Well, Ray didn't have anybody. Ray was essentially an orphan as such, although he had lots of brothers. But let me tell you what Ray told me. I was in California with his mother, George's mother and father, staying at his brother Don's. And everybody, you know, the world revolved around Mother. But Ray had a lot of wisdom there, and I was anxious to know what really went on in New Jersey, why they left New Jersey, why they left Atlantic City, what happened in Lawrenceville, why George was put in this school and not seen for 8 years. All right. It had to do with the fact that they were poor and desperate, that the sister, Rhoda's sister, George's mother's sister, married someone high up in the intelligence community who was he went to the Presbyterian school or something like that. that Ray had been in prison. George's father had been very shortly in prison in New York. And this is, you don't talk about. Ray had seen his mother run over by his father with the girlfriend in the car who wound up being the stepmother. You don't talk about that.
All right.
There were 7 boys, I believe. Ray was right in the middle. All of these pictures have disappeared from my house. Supposedly my husband has never come in to the house. All of this, you know, the pictures of assassins like Rockland Williams and, you know, you can't believe the things that are slowly being taken out of my house. Why? And everything's on computers. All they have to do is, I had tapes that I bought a little Radio Shack tape, and I taped General Gray's, the conversation with Gray's wife, Jan, who said, "Oh, we don't know where George is. We don't know." And I talked to General Gray on the phone. If they don't know where my husband is, and he's working for Charlie Wilhelm now, what does that make Al Gray? After I've been battered, and I'm calling, I've got pictures of bruises, hematomas, broken foot, putting a .45 to my head, laughing at me while he's standing over me with my arms in pain, chasing me in bathtubs, you know, so I'm hiding and saying, "Please don't kill me," while he's laughing. I have took diaries and so forth. Why do they want my diaries? Why don't they want my evidence in the court of this? And I've got it right there for Judge John Moore, who's a commando. Why does John Moore kind of giggle at me? Why, you know, what is so funny about being battered as a wife? And why I have a transcript at the first commissioner's hearing, and Colonel Barry Cantor, who is a Kabbalist, who lives right around the corner from T. Parker Host, who's a commando assassin mob guy, brags about it, who's now has about 7 or 8 agencies and is a friend of George Bush's all of a sudden. Barry Cantor, his office is right next to George Sharp, and they are persecuting me in courts right and left, and it doesn't matter what he says. It's like he's just totally, you know, so it doesn't matter. We'll just ruin you. And then so I find another lawyer, and his name is Doug Ballard. Well, Doug Ballard went to VMI, and I knew Doug Ballard because he was a law partner of Philip Purrington, whose brother Charlie I knew, and I liked Charlie Purrington. He was, when I was dating my first husband, John Pollard, they were best friends. And I went out with Charlie a couple of times, but I was, you know, I was making my debut, and, you know, I was kind of, Charlie was just a good friend, and still I like him. And I introduced him to his wife, and they're still married, and she's a Carolinian, he's a Carolinian. Well, Doug Ballard was in law practice with Phil Purrington. Well, so I went to Doug Ballard, and I heard he was a Christian. And I got the information from Paula Ballard about Obenshain's murder from Paula Ballard. And because Paula was very involved with the Republican Party back when Obenshain was running for governor. They were insiders. He was an Army intelligence person who was doing business with the Saudis. He was up in Washington with Oliver North and that whole crowd. Doug Ballard was doing business, illegal business, money laundering. But I was attracted to him because General Ben Parton said, maybe this guy will help you. Well, I don't know, because what I was set up, or maybe he didn't set me up, but I went to Doug Ballard, and, you know, he's a shyster. This guy is crooked as they come, or either very weak, and I think that goes along together. I told him about the things that had happened to me, and keep in mind, he's Army. He's Army Colonel.
Ballard is.
VMI. Okay, well then I believe in him. I think he just didn't know what I know about Doug Ballard. Because I think he heard Doug Ballard went to this born-again church, and his wife is all this born-again which is great, and because I'm born again. But let me tell you what happened. I mean, and they may have been persecuted. They did go through some persecution, but what happened was, and maybe they know too much, but what happened to me was this, because he is part of the Brotherhood, Doug Ballard is. I trusted him with my file. See, Barry Cantor, my husband's lawyer, is an Army colonel. Ballard is a colonel. The judge, John Moore, is a colonel. The commissioner, two of the first commissioners were colonels. Andrew Aggie, who is mixed up with Crooks in Virginia Beach, he's a commissioner in Virginia Beach. Then there is the first one we were going to get. No, Aggie was the first one we were going to get, Army Colonel, Reserves. Then there is the former Commonwealth Attorney, Andrew Evans. He's in the Masons, and I just talked with his wife not long ago, and she was shaking her head like, yeah, I know all this stuff, I know all this stuff. Well, there's a brotherhood. And Andy Aggie and Andrew just Evans, who was Commonwealth Attorney, they're part of this brotherhood. Now, they were going to judge the case for me. You get the third guy, who was in the House of Delegates, Ned Caton. He is a Coast Guard JAG intelligence guy. So finally, we choose Ned Caton to go because he had done work for us, and I don't think that's really right. But the point that I'm trying to make is that every single one of these men who were judging a battered wife, almost killed, first wife dead, do something with the husband, bring up the battering, it's handled. We go into his quiet, secret office. I think I have a lawyer giving him $1,500, and he's one of these society lawyers. And he doesn't want to mention anything about the abuse for some reason. And I'm sort of being